Hello, I'm Laura Marshall.
And I'm Melinda Rose, and this is Light Matters for May 29th, 2013.
On today's show, a SprayOn flat lens works in the ultraviolet, a smartphone camera becomes a high-resolution spectrophotometer, and a boson-based laser could require way less power than other lasers.
A metamaterial-based flat lens that's easy to fabricate and that can bend and focus UV light could improve photolithography, nanoscale manufacturing, and even high-resolution 3D imaging, say scientists at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The new lens is formed by making a metamaterial from a simple sandwich of alternating nanometer-thick layers of silver and titanium dioxide. The resulting flat slab has a negative refractive index. Also, it is uniquely flat, unlike nearly all lenses today, which are curved and therefore have a limited aperture. For the past decade, scientists have made metamaterials that work in the microwave, infrared, and visible wavelengths, but making metamaterials that work in the UV has been impossible because it requires making structures with features as small as 10 nanometers. The NIST team took inspiration from a theoretical metamaterial design recently proposed by a group in Holland and adapted the design to work in the UV. With its high photon energies, UV light has many applications including photochemistry, fluorescence microscopy, and semiconductor manufacturing. And because their lens doesn't rely on nanoscale patterns, it is inherently easy to fabricate. The work appears in Nature.
An iPhone Cradle and app use the phone's built-in camera and processing power as a biosensor that can monitor some medical conditions inexpensively and non-invasively. The wedge-shaped Cradle, developed at the University of Illinois, contains lenses and filters found in much larger and more expensive laboratory devices. The Cradle holds the phone's camera in alignment with the optical components. At the heart of the biosensor is a photonic crystal that reflects only one wavelength of light while the rest of the spectrum passes through. When anything biological attaches to the crystal, such as proteins, cells, pathogens, or DNA, the reflected color shifts from a shorter wavelength to a longer one. Here's team member Kenneth Long explaining how the sensor works.
And this is essentially a location along the spectrum at which our sensor is resonant at. And depending on where that black bar moves up and down the spectrum, that correlates to a change in color, which is essentially what we're measuring. So we can go ahead and capture our data right now. All right, and so there we have a spectrum right there. But what we're looking for is actually this dip right here in the spectrum. That corresponds to the black gap in the spectrum that you saw on the previous screen. And as that low point moves left and right across the wavelength spectrum, that basically tells us what the shift is in the sensor.
Although the Cradle holds only about $200 of optical components, it performs as accurately as a $50,000 spectrophotometer. The team is working to improve the manufacturing process for the Cradle and are creating one for Android phones. They hope to make them available next year. The work was published in Lab on a Chip.
An electrically driven Polariton laser could significantly improve the efficiency of such devices by requiring 100 times less power than conventional lasers. The system uses the unique physical properties of bosons, something scientists have attempted to incorporate into lasers for decades. This system was created by an international team led by Stanford's Yoshihisa Yamamoto. By applying an electric voltage, the system sends electrons and electron holes into a quantum well. Due to their opposite charge, they are attracted to each other and together form an exciton. The polaritons result from a strong light-matter coupling of these excitons in semiconductor microcavities. These decay after a short time, emitting photons in the process. Electrically driven Polariton lasers could one day be used in consumer electronics or quantum computers, to name just a few applications. The current iteration of the Polariton laser requires 2 to 5 times less energy than a comparable conventional laser, but could require 100 times less energy in the future. One benefit of the Polariton laser is that it only needs to be attached to a power supply to emit photons, allowing it to be easily integrated with existing semiconductor chips in the future. The current Polariton laser can only run at minus 452 degrees Fahrenheit and requires constant cooling by liquid helium. The team hopes switching to a material that requires more energy to break apart excitons will allow them to build Polariton lasers that work at room temperature, an important step toward widespread use. use. The Polariton Laser is already being used at Stanford, however, to develop quantum computers and quantum simulators, and they believe similar lasers will be available to those outside the scientific community within the next 5 to 10 years. The work appears in Nature.
Well, that's it for this edition of Light Matters, the photonics industry's only weekly newscast.
As always, you can write to us with your questions or comments at lightmatters@photonics.com.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.